The courtroom was tense. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly as the gavel echoed through the air. Judge Matthew Calloway adjusted his spectacles, glancing down at the docket before him. The name Pam Bondi stood out, surrounded by a controversy that had brought national attention. What had begun as a seemingly simple legal proceeding had transformed into a landmark case about personal liberties, religious freedom, and the essence of the law itself. Pam Bondi, renowned attorney and former state prosecutor, stood before the court, accused of contempt. Her crime? Wearing a small, delicate silver cross on her lapel while arguing a case in court. The plaintiff, an outspoken activist group, had filed a motion arguing that her visible religious symbol violated the principle of neutrality in legal proceedings. Judge Calloway, known for his rigid adherence to courtroom decorum, ruled against her. He fined her for what he deemed a breach of judicial impartiality. But that was only the beginning. Bondi had not contested the fine at first. Instead, she had paid it in silence, her expression unreadable. But soon, murmurs began to grow. Legal scholars debated the implications. Civil rights groups weighed in. The media swarmed the courthouse, questioning whether the ruling itself was an overreach of judicial authority. Bondi, however, had a plan. And it was about to unfold in the most spectacular way. The trial that shook the legal world. Weeks later, the case was brought to appeal. The courtroom was packed, a battleground of legal minds, journalists, and spectators waiting to see how this constitutional puzzle would play out. Bondi, now representing herself, strode to the center of the courtroom. She was composed, her presence commanding, her silver cross still visible. She did not start with rhetoric or outrage, but with a question. "Your Honor," she said smoothly, "if a piece of jewelry can dismantle the very foundation of this court, then I must ask, what exactly is this court built upon?" Silence. Judge Calloway cleared his throat. "Ms. Bondi, we are here to debate the impartiality of the courtroom. Your visible religious symbol suggests bias, and it is my duty to uphold the neutrality of this institution." Neutrality. Bondi mused, tilting her head. "Then tell me, Your Honor, is a wedding ring neutral?" The judge frowned. What about a yarmulke? A hijab? A turban? Should a Sikh attorney be fined for wearing a dastar? Or a Catholic judge for wearing a crucifix under his robe? The courtroom was still. The legal representatives for the opposition shifted uncomfortably. Judge Calloway hesitated, his rigid confidence shaken. "This is not about suppressing religion," he attempted, "but maintaining the sanctity of the court." Sanctity, Bondi repeated, emphasizing the word. A sacred space where truth prevails, justice is served, and yet, we fine individuals for the mere act of existing as themselves? She leaned forward, voice unwavering. "Your Honor, if my cross implies bias, then so does the belief that its presence inherently threatens this court. The law does not require us to erase identity to seek justice. It requires us to be just despite it." The murmurs in the room grew. Journalists scribbled furiously. Even the opposition lawyer looked hesitant. Bondi continued, now citing past Supreme Court cases, religious discrimination precedents, and instances where the very principle of neutrality had been wielded not to uphold justice, but to strip individuals of their rights. Finally, she concluded, "If this court penalizes me for wearing my cross, it is not protecting neutrality, it is endorsing exclusion. And that, Your Honor, is far from impartial." The judge's lesson. Judge Calloway sat in silence for a long moment. His career had been built on the unwavering belief in order and precedent, but as he looked into the eyes of the woman before him, he saw something unsettling: the truth. The law was not a blunt instrument, but a living, breathing entity meant to uphold justice, not suffocate it. He exhaled slowly. "Ms. Bondi," he finally said, "I have spent decades presiding over this court, believing that impartiality meant detachment. But today, I see that neutrality should not be the absence of belief, but the inclusion of all within the law." A pause. "The fine is rescinded. And more importantly, this court must reconsider how it defines neutrality going forward." A small smile tugged at Bondi's lips as she nodded in gratitude. With the bang of the gavel, the case was closed. But its impact would reverberate far beyond the courtroom walls, forever altering the way justice was interpreted. And Judge Calloway, once steadfast in his convictions, left the bench that day not only as a judge, but as a man forever changed by the brilliance of one woman and her unwavering belief in the law. Epilogue: The Aftermath. In the days that followed, the case made national headlines. Pam Bondi's argument became a defining moment in legal discourse, prompting debates in law schools, newsrooms, and even in Congress. Organizations that had once stood on opposite sides of religious expression and legal neutrality found themselves reevaluating their positions. Judge Calloway, once a stalwart enforcer of rigid courtroom regulations, found himself invited to speak at law forums, discussing the evolution of his own understanding of justice. He acknowledged, with humility, that the law must grow alongside society. Pam Bondi, now hailed as a constitutional warrior, continued her work, defending individuals who found themselves caught in the murky waters of legal interpretation. But she never forgot that moment in the courtroom when she stood not just as an attorney, but as a symbol of what justice should truly represent. And the silver cross? It remained on her lapel, a quiet but resolute reminder that faith and justice could coexist, not as adversaries, but as pillars of a society that valued freedom above all else.